And we're live. Welcome back to the Mind Meld PR vlog. I'm your host, Jonathon Narvey, the founder of Mind Meld PR. I'm here today with Paul Sullivan, the founder of Breakthrough PR. And actually, Paul, maybe I'm going to do a terrible job of introducing you. Maybe it's better if you introduce yourself.
Okay, thanks, Jonathan. I am Paul Sullivan. I am the founder of Breakthrough PR, and we've been in the media relations business mainly for the last couple of decades. Prior to that, I was in the journalism biz and a variety of jobs. Never could hold down a job. Last thing I did was Western editor of the Globe and Mail, and before that, managing editor of the Sun. Also, some TV experiences as a news producer at CBC TV for about 10 years, and also the host of the Early Edition on CBC Radio for a couple of years. So, and a magazine editor, the founder and editor of West Magazine, which was a one-hit wonder back in 1990. So for the Globe and Mail. So it's been a varied turn around the bases.
I've got to say, Paul, your version of not being able to hold down a job is far, far more impressive than my version of not being able to hold down a job. You certainly reached heights I could only have dreamed of. And anyways, I guess the point is we're both people who come from a journalism and PR background. And I've come to rely upon you as a purveyor of sage wisdom and timely advice.
It's only because my beard is white, right?
So I brought you in because I thought, you know, there is a topic that has come up that actually has a local relevance for people who are watching this in Vancouver or who keep an eye on the Vancouver tech scene. Hootsuite has certainly, they're a well-known tech company here in Vancouver, and they've come into in for a bit of controversy, which I feel is somewhat self-inflicted. So I probably should have done this right off the top. The topic of our conversation today is leadership and crisis PR. I think, you know, I want to also set the stage in the sense that I'm not a CEO. Well, I guess I am.
Yes, you are.
PR, but I'm not a CEO of a giant tech company. I did not go through the typical corporate channels to get to where I am, so I understand that things that I pay attention to are maybe not what the leaders at the top level of tech are maybe paying attention to. I also want to set the stage a little bit further in that we're not just going to be talking about Hootsuite today, but an issue that seems to be affecting companies across the spectrum, from Hootsuite to Spotify to Google, Facebook, and I'm sure innumerable tech startups and
Amazon.
Thank you. So let me just quickly talk about what happened this week. And this was that Hootsuite, which is again a leader in the local tech scene, they have social media tools that we use. So big fan. They recently won a contract with ICE, the immigration, I don't know what the acronym stands for, but it's basically the border services for the United States. There was a
it's the immigration control something.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
I should have prepared better. In any case, they won a big contract to provide their tools to ICE, and they had to cancel. Well, or did they have to cancel? That's the question. there was as far as I can tell, sort of a revolt. They did a internal consultation and listened to their people, and some of their people were basically telling them, no, this is an unethical contract. We cannot be, and you know, I'm maybe this is an unfair interpretation, but you know, effectively, ICE is tied to the Trump administration's policies on immigration and border control, which are controversial, to say the least. And so it seems like the rank and file of Hootsuite, much of them objected to any kind of contract with ICE. And the CEO recently, who recently came in, canceled the contract. To my mind, that is a self-inflicted wound on the business side and potentially on the PR side. Maybe I'm wrong. Paul?
Which part of it is self-inflicted?
Which part of it? Well,
Yeah.
I take the I'm looking at this from a French Revolutionary standpoint, in that you know, you give them an inch, they'll take your head. And
Vive la Revolution.
yeah. I feel like if the you know, executives had simply, you know, said, you know, we're listening, we have listened, thank you, and this will be something that we'll consider in future. But this is done. This contract is signed.
I suppose you could argue that the rank and file or the employees or staffers at Hootsuite have saved the company from itself, because after all, ICE is renowned for storing people's bedrooms at 2 o'clock in the morning and hauling them off and deporting them, or putting them in cages at the border, right? So I mean, it's not without some valid concern that getting into bed with ICE or ICE is the equivalent of getting into bed with the devil. So I'm not saying that's the case. I'm just saying that I think that argument is worth making.
I take your point, and I think it's probably, if I had to bet, that is in fact the way a lot of people would see it, if not the majority would see it. You know, Vancouver in particular is a fairly progressive town.
Yes, it's sort of like Portland used to be, or it still is. I don't know. Hard to say what Portland is this week.
Yeah. If we were part of the U.S., I suspect a good, you know, we'd be voting for Biden.
Yeah, Donald Trump would hate us.
Yeah.
Cut off our PPE. Anyway, so I think, you know, I mean, what's interesting here is the first part of the equation, if you like, is why did Hootsuite enter into a contract with a demonstrably controversial agency of the United States government?
Yeah. Well,
first question you got to ask yourself. The second question is how do they alienate their staff in that process? And did they alienate their staff in that process, or was there a spontaneous kickback? And then the final thing is what happened to the team, which I think is probably where Hootsuite really can find its learning. If there's a silver lining to this, it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger, right? So it's possible that this will make Hootsuite stronger.
Yeah, I think, you know, and again, I'm not necessarily an expert in these areas, but I'm going to attempt to steelman the business argument for why the company would have entered into an agreement with ICE. And it essentially comes down to this. As border control, they're somewhat analogous to, say, a police force or the fire department or some other kind of public service that is in charge of something that it's hard, difficult work, and occasionally, you know, there will be elements within any department that will cross the line, and you'll have investigations. But basically, they're a government service that is actually required because the U.S. is effectively a magnet for immigration, whether legal or illegal. You have to have some controls, presumably. If you have no controls over your border, you basically don't have a country. That would be the argument. So they're contracting with a government agency, and to steelman it slightly, just ever so slightly further, to the extent that this bureaucratic organization is controversial, it's controversial in the sense that reporters who have not much else better to do with their time than focus on negative news, have helped stoke the current situation with defund the police and Black Lives Matter and that kind of thing. So to my mind, there's an argument of if the CEO had simply said, look, we're not going to betray our business development people who worked on this deal for months, I assume. And I said, yes, we had complete transparency. We knew what they were doing. And we should just honor this contract. We should take the money. We're a business. If we're not profitable, we die. And if they had simply towed the line.
That would,
yeah.
You know what, Jonathan, that would work
Yeah.
in maybe 2010, that long ago, but 2020 is a different kettle of fish. These kids today, because the prevailing wind questions authority. There's no respect for hierarchy because the hierarchy doesn't deserve respect. And it's time to reconcile with, starting with Black Lives Matter, for example. There's a whole bunch of irritants that were allowed to fester over decades, right? Until it got to the point where somebody, where police are indiscriminately killing people, or appear to be indiscriminately killing people for crimes that would be cast as misdemeanors, right? So, like that guy who tried to escape custody the other day with his family in the car and was shot 8 times in the back. I mean, or the guy who had his life extinguished in front of a crowd, right?
Right. Well, okay. This is really interesting. I'm not.
Then you've got all of these tech companies that appear to be amoral. For instance, Mark Zuckerberg for a long time made the case that they're a platform. They're not a responsible editorial organization. And then when you decided they were a responsible editorial organization, they were stewards of free speech, right? And so, but it's come to the point today where people are demanding social accountability, cultural accountability from corporations. They can't just be businesses anymore. They got to have corporate. They got to have social and cultural purpose, right? And they got to have social and cultural sensitivity. And if they don't have that, their employees are prepared to rise up and call them to account. So that's happening, and I think that the tech companies of the world for so long have been cool and thought that they had an exemption, right? Thought that they had a dispensation because they were cool. Well, they're not getting a dispensation because they're cool anymore. So they have to practice accountability. They have to practice social responsibility, and they're learning, right? And it's an uncomfortable lesson.
This is. You've made some very important points, and I want to get back to them in a moment. I did want to bring up also the recent the example this week or last week of Spotify. And if I'm reading the news related to that right, you're aware of the Joe Rogan deal worth $100 million, where it appears that, again, rank and file members of Spotify want to effectively have editorial control over Joe Rogan's content. And again, to help people understand the significance of this, Rogan gets probably on a typical day, his podcast of say 3 hours will get millions more views than mainstream media.
Does he do better than you?
Sorry, does he do better than me?
Yeah.
Yeah, he might get a few more views than we get from Mind Meld PR vlog. It's possible. I haven't
Hard
looked.
to believe, John.
I have to crunch those numbers. He's been at it for a number of years, so he's got the lead, but we'll catch up eventually. So I think that's another, these incidents keep on coming up. So again, not to necessarily, just look at, say, Hootsuite, but it's Facebook, it's Spotify, it's all these.
Apple, right?
Yeah.
Amazon, any one of them is now being called to account in a way that they haven't before.
So what can they do?
Well, I think they can wake up and smell the coffee. I think that that's a start. The problem is that, let's put this into a bit of a historical context. None of these companies are unionized, right? So they don't do a very good job, or they have a sort of constitutional right for some reason or another not to empower their employees, right? And their they'll argue that there are lots of compensations. It's a great place to work because we got foosball, or because we got free lattes, or whatever, right? But there's no formal mechanism for participation at the board level for employees, right? And that leads to the kind of alienation, right, that we're looking at right now. I think that whether you argue in favor of unions or not, or against unions, or just laissez-faire capitalism, or whatever, you got to understand that people are people. It's human nature, and if they don't have any access to the levers of power, they'll find a way to get some, right? And if that means pulling down statues in the square and being unduly woke, then fine. Right, because at least it gives us some entree, some leverage, that our lives aren't, we're not meaningless ciphers. We're not just, you can't just work us to death and then give us a bonus at Christmas time. So I mean there's a foundation of alienation, if you like. And so I'm not surprised that this is happening. You can talk the talk until the cows come home at Davos in Switzerland, the annual conference for rich people, until you're blue in the face. But if you don't walk the walk, either in terms of climate, or Black Lives Matter, or Aboriginal entitlement title, I could go on, right? There's a whole bunch of things that people believe need to be fixed, and hope that their corporate executives are tuned in to. But if they're not, they're going to remind them that has to happen. I think what it's not as if the PR industry has failed to notice this. There's a huge, what do you want to call it, growth industry in internal public relations. How to communicate with your own people, and I think that so there's lots of techniques involved, things you can do, right? But it seems to me that the one thing that you can do is remember that you're a team, and real teamwork is more than token teamwork. It's a real devolution of power into the hands of people who are adult enough and responsible enough to take that power, right, and to use it responsibly. And I think that's probably where I'd start if I were soul searching, if I were a company that found myself being publicly chastised by my own people.
All right. Well, I'm going to pick up on a few points there, so bear with me. I hope I can remember it, get it all straight in my head. Number one.
You're running it's on my part. Sorry.
It's okay. I do the same thing. So,
yeah.
Okay. Number one, I've never worked at Google or Facebook or a giant tech company, but I gather that, these are companies that already have fairly good, in fact, instant transparency into communications up and down and also sideways, like distributed among teams, and also just whether we're talking email, Slack, the lines of communications, I suspect, are there. If anyone is going to be running a company that is going to keep silos of communication to a minimum, and try to make sure that leaders understand what's happening among their people and vice versa, I would think that these companies would be leaders in that sense. I don't know that to be true, but I'm just postulating that.
Yeah, they don't call it Slack for nothing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like a giant echo chamber. Everybody learns to say yes on a variety of channels, right? But I think that there has to be more going on than technical channel, and real transparency is safe. Right? It's got to be a safe place. And if you don't think you're operating in a safe place, you'll hold your fire until you can express yourself in a either a safe way or you've gone over the top and you become a member of the opposition.
Yeah. I want to clarify what we're talking about here by safe, because there's actually in recent times there's now two effective definitions, and one would be effectively safe from any offensive comment, whatever you might think that might be, and actually that being in that kind of a safe space where no one is allowed to speak their mind or say certain things that may or may not be known what those rules are until you step on that landmine. That's one version of a safe space, and it's not just a thing that we see on universities today. It is within some companies. There's the other version that I think you were alluding to more now, which is more people. They should be free to share their ideas in a way that is conducive to truly thinking things out and having productive communications within a company. At the same time, we're all human beings, and however safe you might make a place, the first definition of safe comes in where there are landmines, and you may either know that they're there, or you have to be you have to be aware of what you can say with certain people.
Okay, so can I respond to that?
Yeah. Oh, please.
Those are very interesting safes. I'll get to the freedom of expression safe in a second, and let's talk about empathy safe. Maybe that's what I'm talking about. Is that you got to be able to speak truth to power, right? And power has to understand the dynamic of the power imbalance, right? You got to have a level playing field. You got to meet on a level playing field where power listens in an active and empathetic way, right? And that takes the messages that are received so seriously that they revise their activities based on that information, right? So,
okay.
so that's and so there's a lot, it's very complicated, a lot of mechanism in there, but it's alternative dispute resolution is what it is. And once again, there's a whole history of ADR, right? That goes back decades and decades, both in the United States, Canada, and other realms. And you could do it here too. The healing circle mechanism that's a sort of alternative court mechanism. So there are lots of ways, right, for it to be a safe place for both management and labor, for both C-suite and employees. So that, I mean, it's not a brand new thing by any stretch of the imagination.
No, I think that's great how you defined that. And I think this actually comes back to my original question. Maybe I didn't phrase it well the first time. So I'm going to try this from a different tack. Is there anything, well, could the management have, say, done otherwise, which is to say, listened, showed they were listening, and yet gone in another direction?
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, that's what leadership's all about. It's like John Horgan. I was just reading a story about how John Horgan has learned to listen by being part of a coalition with the Green Party that ultimately he decided he'd had enough of them. But during that, 3.5 years, he has had to listen and had to act accordingly, right? Because otherwise the coalition would collapse and he would be out, he'd have to go across the floor to the opposition and lose power. And so, there's a sense here that, why should politicians be vulnerable, if you like, to incisive interaction when and you give the tech companies a free ride, or not just tech companies, oil companies, big business, right? I think it's people have figured out that big business has to have a soul, and has to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. And that grand old Eldridge Cleaver equation.
So is that does this come into the PR strategy for this kind of a situation where you sort of change the conversation from being about, look, we, instead of saying, hey, we had a problem or we made a mistake and we fixed it, it's more like, well, focusing on the positive. We are listening, we are changing, we are evolving, we're very cognizant of both what our people who work with us want, what our customers want. And what are the PR strategies here for a company that suddenly makes a decision, whether, for good or bad reasons, but they've made a strategic decision that people weren't really expecting?
Oh, let's talk about Facebook for a minute, right? Facebook has a brand promise. Its brand promise is that it will give you a voice, right? And with a voice comes responsibility. How do we define that at Facebook, right? So it's part of its brand promise. It's part of bestowing a voice upon the voiceless, if you like, and who should be better, right, at empathy, at understanding, at defining clarity, at sharing power than a company like Facebook. But instead, the guy thinks he's John Jacob Astor, right? Robber baron capitalist from the 19th century, after whom Astoria is named because of the fur trade. But I mean, like the point that I'm making is that the brand promise is the key to the success of a company, in terms of its customer relations, in terms of its stakeholder relations, in terms of its community relations, right? And if it violates its brand promise every time it does business, that's a problem. So all you have to do, it seems to me, is listen to your comms department, of course, and figure out how the brand promise manifests itself in your daily activities.
That's fantastic.
That shouldn't be that hard. And that includes your activities, your interactions with your staff.
Mm-hmm.
So that they're not alienated, and so that they participate in the keeping of the promise.
It's very much akin to the strategy I've employed for keeping clients happy, which is, well, it's a two-part rule. Number one, tell the client exactly what they want to hear. Part two, do that thing that you promised you would do for them. And if you fulfill both of those, you're good. So
be careful what you wish for.
yeah, well, that's the thing is you have to, at the same time that you're telling them what you want, what they want to hear, you've got to manage those expectations. So as long as you know, companies have done that with their customers or you know, with their partners in the media, they, you know,
I think there's another option. I mean, I like your 2 points. I just add a third point. Tell them what they didn't expect, but once they hear it, they like to hear it. You know, I mean, make it resonate with them.
Yeah.
And that means being able to understand what's going on in their heads. And the least they could do is try to understand what's going on in the heads of their own employees.
Well, Paul, this has been a very a great conversation. I've learned a lot from it, and thank you for your perspective. So once again, for those who've been listening, we are on the Mind Meld PR vlog. I'm Jonathon Narvey. I've been speaking with Paul Sullivan from Breakthrough PR. Paul, if the viewers wanted to learn more about you, how would they do that?
Well, they would go to breakthroughpr.com.
Okay, perfect.
Where my somewhat out-of-date website resides.
Well,
work to do there.
Okay. Well, on that note, thanks very much. And I hope that we get to speak in future on the show. So
yeah, it was lots of fun, Jonathan, and keep up the good work. And at some point, you'll get all the way to you know, halfway to Joe Rogan.
Soon, very soon.
I can see it. Yeah.
Thanks, Paul.
Bye.